Benjamin Netanyahu chose to sack the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, and appoint the serving foreign minister, Israel Katz, as the new defense minister. So the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, has been sacked, and the foreign minister, Israel Katz, is now in the position of the defense minister, or more likely the genocide minister. And there have been reports that Benjamin Netanyahu is on the way to sack the IDF chief of staff and the Israeli head of the Shabak. And we're going to speak about certain statements that came in, what context, why, what happened before, and what's likely to happen after this move from Benjamin Netanyahu. To begin with, Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant have been in very bad terms. They've been on very bad terms for a very long time, and Benjamin Netanyahu previously sacked the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, back in 2023, early 2023, at the peak of the protests against Benjamin Netanyahu during the judicial reform protests in what was called at the time, following the move from Netanyahu, the evening of Gallant. Now they're calling tonight the evening of Gallant 2. Why? Because many people took the streets at the time in 2021, and now they're taking 2023, and now they're taking the streets again. However, back then, Benjamin Netanyahu had to retract from the move and reappoint Yoav Gallant as the defense minister. Why? Because there was a lot of public pressure. Now he saw this as a very good opportunity to sack him during the day of the voting, on the day of the voting for the presidential elections. He saw that it was a very suitable time. Before, he had tensions with Gallant. Even when he had him back in the position, they still didn't like each other very much. They did not see eye to eye, but Yoav Gallant saw himself as a person who keeps Netanyahu in check, and so did the Israelis who don't really like Benjamin Netanyahu. They saw Yoav Gallant as a person who keeps things manageable between the public and Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, we went back to early 2023, moving forward to the 7th of October and Al-Aqsa flood. He still had tensions with Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, from the early days of this war, we have been talking about the tensions in the top senior positions inside of Israel, primarily between Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, but also they stretched to the IDF chief of staff and other senior figures. And then we, of course, had the people who joined the government, the temporary cabinet, the previous ministers and previous IDF chiefs of staff, Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, later also resigned just a few months back because they could no longer continue when they say that Netanyahu is making everything impossible when it comes to reaching a ceasefire. So they also resigned, and their resignations were exceptionally important. Why? Because they were the people with the most experience in that cabinet. And what's Netanyahu doing now, de facto, is appointing yes men next to him in crucial positions, contrary to what the tradition has been for decades now, at least for the longest serving defense ministers, to be more accurate, where most of them would have very important roles previously before coming into the position of defense minister. So you will see many of them being IDF chiefs of staff, or at least like the Israeli Air Force, the heads of the Israeli Air Force previously, for them to take the position of the defense minister. But now he appointed Israel Katz. Israel Katz is a man with basic service in the Israeli army. He served in the paratroopers in the Israeli army before, and he didn't have any significant history in the Israeli army. He doesn't have that experience. He doesn't have that leadership experience. He doesn't have technical experience about logistics, people inside the army, the dynamics of it, the progression of it. All of these things are exceptionally important when you are in a key position, such as the position of the defense minister. You need to have an extensive history and background in the security establishment, if not in the army itself, because you're going to be directly in charge of the army and the decisions that are made when it comes to the defense. Now, also, Yoav Gallant, of course, he had these disagreements before, but he decided to stay, although there were reports that he might also resign, but people were asking him, no, stay in, to keep him in check and apply pressure on him from within, and. He stayed there, not only because he thought he might be able to do something to change how things are run under the Netanyahu government, it's also because he had very close ties with the US administration. The United States considers Yoav Gallant to be their man inside the government. They don't really like Smotrich and Ben Gvir too much. Netanyahu, he doesn't always listen. He causes frictions internally. But Yoav Gallant, to them, appeared to be the person of the moment when it comes to the Israeli government, in particular following the departure of Benny Gantz. They used to like Benny Gantz very much. They used to welcome him to official visits to the United States, despite disagreement and disapproval from Benjamin Netanyahu. At one point, he ordered the Israeli embassy in the United States to not welcome Benny Gantz and not consider his trip to be an official visit because it wasn't approved by Benjamin Netanyahu. But after the resignation of Benny Gantz, we had Yoav Gallant remaining in the government. So we started to have less critical voices of the government, but that was not enough for Netanyahu. Netanyahu wants to have a full say when it comes to the war and everything that happens, and he doesn't even want internal pressure. However, he did not want to sack Yoav Gallant because of American pressure. You see, he still considers U.S. pressure, Benjamin Netanyahu, and the dynamics of how things work between the U.S. administration and the people in the security establishment in the U.S. and the security establishment in Israel. Like Yoav Gallant used to always meet with Lloyd Austin, with the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S., and he was the man that the United States administration deals with inside of Israel, not just for normal coordination, for everything that is related to the benefit of Israel. It's not like the U.S. was trying to, we know the United States administration, they are supportive of Israel and whatever it does. And Yoav Gallant was their man. So they were coordinating the defense from the Iranian attack. They were coordinating the deployment of more troops in the region. They were coordinating with Yoav Gallant the deployment of the THAAD systems as well. Before the Israeli attack, after the Israeli attack, how are they prepared in terms of defense? Everything that's related to Israel, that is indeed, to their consideration, beneficial for Israel. Now, of course, there's a counter argument of what's beneficial for Israel in its genuine meaning. However, we're talking about the current affairs and the current situation and how things are. And the United States coordinated with Yoav Gallant heavily. So Benjamin Netanyahu, he did not want to do something that would increase the tensions between him and the US administration, because he already did certain things that weren't to their liking. They already had certain tensions. He had sour conversations with Joe Biden. And we heard about certain periods where a certain leverage was used in a very limited manner, not to a level where it would affect Israel's genocide campaign in Gaza and aggression in general in the region, but to a certain extent. And that's why we had more talks from Israel about the need to produce their own weapons, not rely on the Goyim for support, including the United States, and that Israel will have to find its own destiny and will have to fight even if it stands by itself. All of these statements came from Netanyahu and from senior figures in Israel, and all of them indicate that there is a level of dissatisfaction from the United States administration when it comes to the vision of Benjamin Netanyahu versus the vision of the US administration when it comes to the region of West Asia and the tensions that are happening and how things should be resolved. So he chose the 5th of November now to sack Yoav Gallant. The United States is busy. Everyone is talking about the elections. He is probably anticipating a win for Trump, but nothing is guaranteed yet. Everything is still ongoing now. And according to recent polls, things are quite close between Harris and Trump. But to him, that was a golden opportunity to take such action. In addition to all of the differences, of course, between him and Gallant about the running of the war and the lack of will from Netanyahu to reach a ceasefire, where Gallant already asked for it several times and he criticized Netanyahu openly, alongside the meetings that they broke, the meetings that they couldn't make. They had press conferences without each other. Gallant stormed into his office to threaten him and his staff with a brigade from the IDF. And he also criticized him when it comes to the judicial reform before and now with regards to the conscription. Why? Because although it is law now, unprecedented, in Israel for the Orthodox community to join the army, Netanyahu is in power, and Netanyahu relies heavily on the Orthodox Jews who are in his government. Not necessarily because all of them agree with him, but for their own benefit. They get perks from him, and he promises them that, I won't enforce the conscription. I'll still give you money. I'll still fund you, and he had a problem with Gallant with regards to that, and that was another reason why he forced him out. Now, he waited for this moment. This was the most suitable moment for him to sack Yoav Gallant, because who's going to talk to him, like from the United States? We had a couple of statements coming from security officials in the United States talking about Gallant, and then Gallant had another press conference himself saying that I have accomplished many things. We've accomplished a lot of things when it comes to the war, and we had many accomplishments when it comes to Gaza. And the main thing from my perspective, according to him, was the security of the state of Israel. To him, it was the security of the state of Israel. Now, he, of course, appointed the serving foreign minister, Israel Katz, as the defense minister. And he had Gideon Sa'ar, the man who was potentially going to replace Gallant before, as a defense minister, and a man who also axed Netanyahu and left his party before, but later took a step back. He appointed him as the foreign minister. So clearly he's moving towards a reshuffle in his government, a reshuffle that would strengthen him even more, strengthen his position even more in the Israeli government, and allow him to implement everything that he wants without even any ounce of scrutiny, and continue without any prospect of a ceasefire. Now, we had several reports after that from Israel saying that, well, and I'll get to some of the official reports in a second. By the way, when it comes to what Israel officially said, we had reports that Netanyahu was about to also sack the IDF chief of staff and the head of the Israeli Shabak. Who reported that first? A website called Walla. This website reported it, and now this website is not working for some reason. I tried to log on to the website after that report, and login error. It's no longer working for some reason. I'm not sure if it's connected to that report or not. However, it wasn't only them. We had other reports from other websites saying that no, indeed, it was Benjamin Netanyahu really is looking to ditch the IDF chief of staff and the head of the Shabak. That's not new. We had reports back in August that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to sack the IDF chief of staff and the head of the Shabak. He already said that before, and he intended to go ahead with these reports. Officially, the Netanyahu office said that no, that's not true. We don't want to sack them. And that's not on the table. That's not correct. But he had an intention before. And he also now sacked Yoav Gallant. He sacked Yoav Gallant because he said there's a lack of trust between him and Yoav Gallant. And if he sacked Yoav Gallant, well, he still has lack of trust with the IDF chief of staff. He security checks the IDF chief of staff before meeting him, and he has distrust in the head of the Shabak. So if the lack of trust is the reason or the parameter that Netanyahu establishes his decisions on, that means he's on his way to sack the IDF chief of staff and the head of the Shabak at the right moment. He just didn't want to go all out maybe in one go, because that would increase the tensions in Israel. And we have thousands of Israelis in the streets now in Tel Aviv and Haifa and other parts too protesting. They closed a main road in Tel Aviv. What is he going to do? So I'm going to share a couple of the reports coming from Israel. We're going to start off with this one during the war for the second time in the government. And after that, we're going to get to establishing an understanding as to what that means when it comes to the war and what we are anticipating to see moving forward following these moves coming from Benjamin Netanyahu. When it said during the war for the second time in the government, and the first time, of course, was the judicial reform, like we said before, Netanyahu fired Gallant, a huge political drama at the same time as the US elections. The defense minister will be replaced in Israel by Katz. Gideon Sa'ar will be appointed as foreign minister. The trust between me and Gallant is broken. Full trust is required in the midst of the war, claimed Prime Minister. Gallant said the security of the country is my life's mission. The dismissal during an acute coalition crisis, a senior government official, he was sacrificed on the altar of the evasion laws. They're mentioning the evasion laws in reference to the attempted conscription with the Orthodox community. So they're blaming Netanyahu, of course, of allowing this evasion, which is legal, and he is sacking Yoav Gallant because of that, because Yoav Gallant believes that it is necessary for him to be in the government. Netanyahu viewed Gallant as a problem, and Gallant himself viewed his position very powerful in the government when it comes to trying to force something to work. He tried to speak with some of the Orthodox community before and leaders to say, listen, well, let's get at least a few thousand in. Let's make something work. They had previous attempts before, but it did not work. Okay. What did Gallant say in more detail? Gallant, let's get to that in 1 second, because he had a response during or after Netanyahu's announcement. He shared this. Gallant, there is and will be no atonement for abandoning abductees. I was fired, among other things, because of the recruitment issue. Now, he's also saying it's because of the recruitment issue. So the conscription being applied on the Orthodox community. In a speech from the Kiryat, the outgoing defense minister claimed that he was fired by Prime Minister Netanyahu due to disputes on 3 issues: his positions on the draft exemption issue, the abductees deal, and the establishment of a state investigative committee. When value darkness surrounds me, I stick to the compass, he said. He ended his speech by saluting to the fallen and the soldiers. I trust you, according to him. So he is accepting the fact that that's it, he has been sacked. I don't think that any protests in Israel will bring him back like previously, because Netanyahu did not submit to any will of the people, although they're calling the night now the Gallant night number 2, in reference to the first Gallant night when they took the streets after Netanyahu sacked him after the judicial reform, saying Gallant night 2, crowds in the streets, blockades in Ayalon, and at the intersections, fences were breached in Jerusalem. And that's in reference to Netanyahu's residence in Jerusalem, because Netanyahu spends most of his time in Jerusalem, not in Caesarea. And when he actually went to Caesarea, he was almost assassinated by Hezbollah. Thousands of messages were sent in protest groups, and many went out to demonstrate in Tel Aviv, Israel, Haifa, Beersheba, and other locations. Ayalon was blocked in both directions. At Kaplan and the Horev intersection, chants of Bibi traitor were heard, and the olive branch was activated near Netanyahu's house in Jerusalem. The coastal road was blocked in Herzliya, 2 blockade centers on Route 4, a protest also in Otef and Carmiel. The protest organizations against the legal revolution called on the masses to demonstrate this evening in a number of locations against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decisions to fire Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and replace him with Foreign Minister Israel Katz. It was also decided that Minister Gideon Sa'ar will be appointed as Foreign Minister. Thousands of messages activists were sent in various protest groups, similar to what happened in March last year, when crowds went out to protest following the dismissal of the Minister of Defense in what was later called Leil Gallant, or the Night of Gallant, across the country. Less than an hour later, crowds began to take the streets, and as we see here, the crowds in Israel, mostly in Tel Aviv, but also in places like Haifa and Beersheba and other locations as well. The country is in danger, at war. Prime Minister's office betrays the people knowingly and with authority. This was the reason for Yoav Gallant's dismissal, and these are the people protesting. And of course, we had more severe statements against Benjamin Netanyahu previously and now as well. Free the land, crime minister, alongside more intense things when it comes to Netanyahu. Like I said before, people are wishing him death. You know, whenever something happens with the leader, they say, I wish it was Netanyahu, not us. Okay. Will Benjamin Netanyahu listen? Will Benjamin Netanyahu listen? Will he submit to the will of the people this time after all of these protests? Not likely. It is not likely to happen. And I'll tell you why. Netanyahu, he faced the most severe protests just over a month ago. We had 800,000 approximately in the streets. That's 8% of the total official Israeli population. And he did not submit. He continued, and he went on to an escalation. And he continued to Lebanon, and nothing is stopping him. So he deviated to those locations to deviate the attention again from the protests that were happening against him in the streets. Now he's using the fact that attention is elsewhere, primarily in the United States elections, and he is implementing what he wants, because from his perspective, either Trump or Harris, both would work for Netanyahu. It's not a problem for Benjamin Netanyahu. If Harris comes back, well, the Biden administration that Harris was in facilitated this genocide. They supported this genocide. They participated in this genocide, and they gave him everything he needs, although they verbally disagreed with him at certain points or said they were about to apply pressure here and there, but they supported him. From Trump's perspective, it might be even better for Benjamin Netanyahu. And so, no problem. Who's going to come? Who's going to stop me? No one's going to stop him from the people who are projected to win in the United States, either Harris or Trump. But they're not going to stop Benjamin Netanyahu. He's going to continue and get his way. That is, unless the reports that he was, about to get a deal with Trump somehow. Again, nothing has been confirmed, and they denied it. Well, his office denied it. Actually, get implemented. That's assuming Trump comes into power. And Trump, of course, he promises everything before he gets elected. But again, election promises. How likely are they to follow up on them? Not very likely. So we are facing a situation now where Benjamin Netanyahu takes out one of the most important figures in the Israeli government and one of the key connection points between Israel and the United States administration, and a person who hasn't really had many tensions with the United States administration, unlike Netanyahu and others as well. Or some countries are calling to impose sanctions on them, although they should impose sanctions as a whole, because of what the country is doing. But in reference to Smotrich and Ben Gvir, he took him down, although he had a very rich history in the Israeli army. And now he is appointing someone with no significant background in the Israeli army, no significant nor rich background in leadership positions in the Israeli army or in the security establishment, but a yes man, a man who will say yes to Benjamin Netanyahu whenever he wants anything from him. That's Israel Katz. So you're talking about someone who won't show resistance to Benjamin Netanyahu from within, who won't have a lot of scrutiny when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu's plans, and who won't object the potential of prolonging the war for a much, much longer period. Now, people inside of Israel who oppose the Netanyahu government, they used to reach out to the negotiating delegation at one point, which consists of the head of the Mossad and the head of the Shabak and Yoav Gallant as well. They used to reach out for them and tell them that, it's not enough what you're doing and you need to take action. Some of them called them to resign as well, like Benny Gantz did before. As a matter of fact, Benny Gantz himself tried to convince Yoav Gallant to resign so that he can apply more pressure on the Benjamin Netanyahu government. But Yoav Gallant decided to stay in the government to try and apply pressure from within, something that clearly hasn't worked, and ended up in Netanyahu sacking him and appointing a yes man who will not challenge Benjamin Netanyahu, who will approve everything and continue down the plan. Which context is this coming in? It's coming in a context of course, the United States elections today. That's why Netanyahu used today to do that. And it's coming at a moment where Israel is anticipating a response from Iran. Okay, if Netanyahu genuinely cares about the security of the state of Israel, would he go and sack the person who coordinated throughout all of this period with the American administration to protect Israel from an attack from Iran? How is that going to help Israel? How is that going to help the security of the state of Israel? It's not going to help it with any way, shape, or form. It's not going to help it in any way, shape, or form. And it's going to increase the risk that is coming on Israel. Why? Because, well, Israel Katz, he doesn't have that experience. He's gonna have to be handed over so much, and if you have risk of sacking the IDF chief of staff and the head of the Shabak, that's gonna make things even worse. So Netanyahu is making Israel less secure, more fragile, more split, and more genocidal. He is planning to continue what's happening. We have a pending Iranian response. He's making Israel less secure. And there's an argument that this is Iran's golden time to attack Israel now. And he is also implementing the continuation of the general's plan. The general's plan, the genocide that is being committed in North Gaza and the ethnic cleansing, that was something that received harsh criticism from the United States of America. They gave Israel a deadline on October the 13th, which is about to expire in a week. We're on the 5th of November now. 1 week, 1 day, 8 days. It's going to expire. They said we are going to give Israel 30 days to improve the situation and show us that they took actions. Again, all vague talk. Again, nothing convincing. It's not as if, if Israel's not going to do it, we're going to do something big. But there has been a certain use of leverage before. They might try and do something. Now that he got the actual defense minister out, and he brought Israel Katz as a defense minister, you're talking about a continuation of that plan. We are not seeing any signs of potential ceasefire. All of the talks that are happening are described by the Palestinian negotiating side as theater, not serious. Talks about several days, no talks about withdrawal, no talks about a complete ceasefire, no talks about rebuilding, no talks about aid, no talks about the people going back everywhere. And the only thing that they're saying is that Israel wants a few days of ceasefire and us releasing some of the prisoners. And that's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, one of the senior figures of Hamas, Mahmoud al-Mirdawi, several days back, he said that anyone counting on the death of Sinwar to bring the Hamas conditions down when it comes to the conditions of the ceasefire is delusional. And Hamas even didn't have or declare a new political bureau leader yet, but they are still having these statements signaling that we are on the same path, and it doesn't matter how much you're gonna kill certain leaders or continue your barbarism, we're not gonna stop. But Netanyahu is not looking like a person who wants to stop, and this reshuffle in his cabinet is just another proof that Benjamin Netanyahu is looking to increase the tensions, not decrease them. And we are potentially looking at worse days to come when it comes to escalation from Israel. Just after this declaration, we had 15 people being killed in Lebanon in strikes coming from the Israeli forces in Lebanon. And they're most likely going to increase the implementation and expand the implementation of the general's plan to stretch out to all of the northern part of Gaza and then continue down the central and southern parts of Gaza. Although, again, despite all of that, they are not succeeding in implementing everything that they want, and they are still facing resilience from the population who refuse to leave and remain despite all of the atrocities and starvation campaign. And they are not stopping the fierce resistance that is coming on them from the ground in Gaza, in North Gaza, in all other parts of Gaza.